So here I am, here we are. I'm here with Jared, the ex-US Marine turned mercenary turned spiritual seeker. How are you, brother?
I'm good, man.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it's great. Like, I'm just really blown away just by your story, you know, just meeting you from the first day and hearing your history. I mean, look, we're in April now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in the Dust Bowl of Iraq like 4 months ago, you know? You just left in December, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's just crazy, just the transformation and the transition that you've gone through. I mean, you couldn't have gone through, or, you know, two completely different, you know, you've been stepping in two completely different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
One of fear, and now you've just moved into one of love. And it's just, I don't know how you've done it, honestly. and that's, you know, that's what I want to sort of get your take on. It's just incredible. Tell us about your life anyway.
Before the Marine Corps, I was involved in a lot of youth organizations, an organization called DMLA for a long time. It was a youth fraternity for boys 12 to 21, and it taught us 7 cardinal virtues to live our life by, and it's filial love, reverence for sacred things, courtesy, comradeship, fidelity, cleanness, and patriotism.
Okay.
And so I think those were like the core foundations for most of my young adulthood and my young life. So I think that had a lot to do with me being able to bridge what was going on in my life. At 19, I joined the Marine Corps, and I went into security forces, and then I went into 2-7, the battalion that the infantry battalion, and. Yeah, man. My time in the Marine Corps was, I did 5 years in. It was I went to multiple different countries. I saw lots of crazy stuff, and I saw lots of cool stuff. Learned a lot of things about brotherhood and family and all of that through the military. And then after that, in the military, I got married at the age of 21, and then we were married for about 2.5 years, and we got divorced around that in 2012. And that's when I first heard about ayahuasca. It was when I was going through this divorce.
Okay.
And after the divorce, I really wanted to get out of my situation. I didn't know what I really wanted to do anymore. I didn't want to be where I was at, so I started applying for contracts overseas.
Right.
And then I went on my first contract in 2013 to Afghanistan.
So you actually wanted to leave the Marines?
Yeah.
Just be more freelance?
Yeah, I got out of the Marine Corps in 2011.
All right. So you didn't actually want to be in the Marine Corps anymore? Or?
Yeah, I felt like my time in the Marine Corps was... I mean, like, to be honest, man, I wasn't like the perfect Marine. I didn't really like being in the time I was in because of the mentality I had.
Right.
I felt like I handled a lot of things very immaturely because I was going through a lot at a young age. But I could have stayed in. I thought about it for a long time because all I ever wanted to be since I was a kid was a Marine.
Really?
Yeah, that's it. Like, my dad would tell you is that, like, when I was a kid, I would say, oh, what are you going to be when you grow up? Marine.
Yeah, what was so, like...
I know, right?
What was so attractive about it?
I don't know.
Shooting guns?
Guns are cool. I mean, like, the call to battle,
There's a real manliness to it.
The manliness, the romanticized version of what we perceive as war or being a warrior and all that. I mean, like, I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. It also could have been just a drive that I had, man. I mean, but yeah, since I was a kid, always out playing Army or Marine in the woods and stuff, and it was just something I always wanted to do, man. But yeah, so in 2012, I applied for my first contract. I got out in 2011 because that was a big time for me. In 2011, I jumped back and forth. Should I stay in? Should I not stay in? Should I stay in? Should I not stay in? And I actually wrote down all these pros and cons about whether I should stay in or not. And the pros were about this big, and the cons were about this big. Right. So, but the funny thing was, it was still a debate for me because the only pros that I wanted to stay in for was constant money, medical insurance, and you know, it was in my
Right,
comfort
so it's
zone.
just a job.
Yeah, it was just a job at that
You
point.
just pay the bills, right?
And I was active. I was active military, not reserve. So to me, it was a lifestyle that I was going to be in.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a job. So if I was treating it like a job, I probably should have left it.
Right.
So that's why I got into contracting, because then it was just a job. It wasn't. It was a lifestyle.
Was the work a lot more tame than perhaps being in the Marines? Same sort of thing?
Yeah, it was basically the same thing for more money, but we had more rights.
All right.
Because it's a part of corporate. It's a part of, like, we're civilians.
Yep.
So if I didn't want to be there, I could quit anytime I wanted to.
Right.
If I thought I was being, I don't know, harassed like you would in a workplace, I could report that to somebody.
Were your living conditions different?
Depending, but that's what you knew when you were going into your contract. Like, you would see what the living conditions were. Most of the time it was pretty vague. They would say things like austere environment, which could mean anything from living in a shack to living in a really nice place with air conditioning.
Right. And what are your contracts? What do they entail? More like doing protection?
Yeah, just mostly just security guard work. Like guarding perimeters, guarding people, and then on top of that, training. Yeah, I would train foreign military.
Alright.
Specifically on my last contract. So.
Alright. Nice. So, and you did that for how long? A couple of years?
On and off for about 5 years.
Wow. And you just ended that. That was just recently.
Yeah, I just ended that in December, and then came to Nimacaya.
Yeah. Peru.
And came to Peru in January to start working on the spiritual side of myself.
Yeah, but when was that tipping point? Like, at what point during your, let's say, your career, did you actually think, that you wanted to, I don't know, dive into yourself, perhaps? Did you actually at any time click and think, shit, what I'm doing here is just not resonating with me anymore? Or?
I think the shift started, and it's something I never would have expected, but it was the first time I took LSD. That was a huge shift for me. Right. It just helped me see the world differently, and I got into this state after it was over of, like, very analytical, very philosophical way of looking at the world.
Right.
And some people call it the afterglow, I guess. But that was when I think the shift happened, where I started just seeing things a little bit differently.
Right.
Not enough for me to notice, because I was still going on contracts, I was still doing these things.
Sure, but it was like that little seed got planted, right?
Exactly. And so, and that shifted my whole perspective, and then my focal point changed, and then I was like, well, I'm going to do this contract and pay off some bills and everything else, and if I'm good in a year, is what I thought. I was like, okay, then I'm going to go to Peru, and I'm going to drink ayahuasca. And the reason why that is because I was intrigued by ayahuasca, because scientists and people who were atheists came and drank ayahuasca, and then suddenly were not.
Right.
So that intrigued me to the point where I was like, well, what would you do to meet God?
Yeah. Right.
So I had to go find out for myself.
Yeah. How did you even find out about ayahuasca? Was it just through the LSD thing and then it just...
No, it was, like I said, it was in 2012. I was watching a documentary. It was DMT, the Spirit Molecule, on Netflix. And he talked about DMT, and then in there a little clip was about ayahuasca, and that was just the little seed, because it wasn't even a movie or a documentary about ayahuasca.
Yeah, right.
Just a little seed in 2012 that was planted. And because I was into psychedelics, because I was interested in them, I knew of the various ones that were out there.
Yeah.
So ayahuasca was just one of those ones that was like, it's up here.
I guess it was just a more of a natural progression for you, right? Because you would have done mushrooms and smoked it.
And that's what it felt like for me, as I was progressing. I felt like I was, in essence, training for it.
Oh, really? You're working your way up to it.
Yeah, and then getting here, I realized that that's not the case at all.
No, well, you can never really prepare for it, that's for sure. But what has it been like? Like, when was the first time you did ayahuasca?
Last April.
All right,
so
a year ago. A year ago now. Just like, what did you go through? Like, coming from Iraq and all of that, and then going into the depths of your own psyche. I mean, shit, man.
It was everything I didn't expect.
Dude, it must have brought up
It did.
a lot of things.
It did. It brought up a lot of stuff for me. my first ceremony was very mellow, very relaxed, and I got a lot of really amazing insights about myself and about ego and about where I have put myself in my life and where I have made myself miserable in my life. And but in the second ceremony, that was where the real work started. That's when everything started coming up. And, and it was scary. It was beautiful. It was all encompassing. It was just it was exhausting. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have felt so drastically changed. Just the next day, like I felt like I had gotten a ton of stuff like off of my shoulders. I didn't even know what it was, half of it. It was just like I felt lighter. And that's the big shift. And the funny thing about ayahuasca though too is it wasn't just the ceremonies that did it for me. Because when I was leading up to it, like I said, I was training for it. I heard people were getting messages like, you should quit smoking cigarettes and you should eat healthier and you should. And I thought to myself, I was like, man, I already know that. I know I should quit smoking cigarettes. I know I should meditate. I know I should. So for 3 months prior to coming to do ayahuasca, I started eating healthy and then meditating.
Really?
And
I got to tell you, there's this awesome photo that I really love of you, and you're like in your room in Iraq, meditating with like your rifle on your lap.
I have my gear on. And my rifle.
Man. See if I can find it.
We'll put it up, man.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, it's but that sparked it. I didn't realize because I was diving so much into the research of ayahuasca that I have a playlist now that I give friends because I've looked at pretty much every video there is on YouTube about ayahuasca, everyone's testimonials about this because I didn't want to jump into it blind. Right. So because I was doing that, I was hearing this message of like self-love and self-care from people who were giving their testimonials. Right. So it was going into my psyche without even me knowing it. So things were shifting and I didn't even know because I was starting to be more positive and I was starting to eat healthier and I was starting to live healthier and I was starting to calm the mental clarity, the mental chatter down. Yeah. And so when I came here, it was like I was on ayahuasca just helped me propel where I was already at.
Absolutely. You're getting into that frequency of it already. Yeah, well, that's amazing. So, just by researching it was just subliminally prepping you. I mean, I didn't really have I had no idea what ayahuasca was. I just threw myself out here. But it was amazing. So how do you think how has the transition been coming out of your previous life to, I guess, liberation? Or?
I said this a lot when I first got home. When I left my contract and came here for the first time, and then I got home, I didn't know if I want to come back to Iraq. I was very torn about it. I was like, man, but I felt that I still needed to go back. I still wanted to make some extra money. I still needed to take care of some stuff. There was tons of people out there who were interested in what had happened or how I was changed. So I asked for an extra week off, and my boss gave it to me. So I stayed home for an extra week so I could help integrate back. And, the way I could describe it was everything was different, but nothing had changed.
Right, you just jump back in.
Yeah, and that was my whole goal. Is just I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to kind of jump back into my old life and see what happened. Yeah. And the funny thing was starting to happen to me. Like I'd be out with my friends, and there would be like a loud bang, and I wouldn't jump. Or I'd be in big crowds of people, and I wouldn't feel claustrophobic.
Which previously you used to.
Always. Yeah. It was always a concern of mine. It was always in the forefront of my mind. I caught myself not being concerned about looking for exits anymore because I'd always be putting my back to the wall and having to look at all the exits.
Everywhere you went.
Everywhere I went. So like I always want a corner booth or this and that but it was just in the back of my mind now. It was because it was still there, but it was funny because I became aware of it. And what I think ayahuasca really did for me was help me to develop a deeper level of awareness of my thoughts. Yeah. And that's really where the shift started, was me noticing what I was thinking, noticing what I was experiencing on another level, like taking a step back. And so when I started feeling that, I didn't know how I felt about it, because as a contractor, as a person who does that, I was like, is this going to risk my life? Because these things, these muscle memory things that I have could potentially save me. But at the same time, they were annoying at home.
Yeah, you didn't really need them, so to speak.
It felt like it, but at the same time, for me, when something would happen and I would jump or whatever, and I would get it would not be that I jumped. It would be that I was very embarrassed for reacting like that around my friends.
Really?
And even though they all understood and everyone understood, it was just my own insecurity, because I had felt out of control of myself for just a brief second. Like it was an unintentional, out of control act, and I didn't like that I was out of control of myself. So, but ayahuasca, for some reason, when I got home, a lot of that little stuff was just not there anymore. And I didn't realize how much of that little stuff had led up and built to the big stuff.
Right.
You know?
I guess that's what PTSD
Yeah.
is, right? It would be a whole series of small little things.
Yeah, and I would never tell anybody that I had PTSD. I was never diagnosed PTSD. I would say that I've never been in any situations to give myself PTSD.
I think that everyone coming out of a situation like that, being in war, would have to.
Yeah, and there's situations, and I think that PTSD comes down to trauma.
Right.
And what's trauma for you might not be trauma for me.
Right.
But it's trauma nonetheless. So, and the only reason why I say I would not diagnose myself is because I'm not an expert. But I would definitely say I can relate to the ideas of what PTSD is. And I know that I felt better after ayahuasca, more clear-headed, and just a deeper level of me, like understanding where I'm coming from.
So you think that, like, by taking ayahuasca, it could really help people suffering from, like, PTSD or severe cases?
I think ayahuasca can help all those who are seeking the help.
Yeah, good answer. Because not everyone's seeking it. Some
You have to want to change to do it.
Right.
And that's the difference, is I wanted a different life. I came here to change. I kept saying it and unconsciously saying it. I was like, man, I heard a lot of people change when they go do ayahuasca. I wonder what I'm going to change into. I was already open to changing. If you go home and you repeat those old habits and you keep doing those things, just like with anything, then it starts to slip away.
Well, that's the thing. So you were here a year ago, right? And then after you were here, you went through what you went through, and then you went back to Iraq.
Yeah, so I went home.
So that would have changed your whole perspective.
It did. So, yeah, getting to Iraq now, is like, after I was home and integrated with that and realized that everything was different, I was in going through that. A couple weeks later, I went back to Iraq, because that was my job.
Right.
So I went back there, and the strangest thing has happened. Everyone noticed there was a big change, and I didn't even notice it. I was like, I feel different, but I don't seem different. Like, people would say things like, you look happier, you're glowing, something's different about you, and they were all curious about it. And what I was doing was I was just expressing unconditional love to everybody. I mean, the soldiers I was training, the guys I worked with, even the people I was having problems with at work, I was just like, I had changed my whole perspective and had just was expressing to them just kindness and genuine love for them being human beings.
Now, in that environment, there's probably not too many people doing that.
No,
right?
It's not, and it was a very insecure spot for me to be in.
Well, you would have been standing alone with that.
Yeah, at least it felt like that.
Yeah, right.
But once I started doing it, it was reciprocated back tenfold. Oh, absolutely. It was a wild experiment that I felt like I was.
Were
a
you
part
doing
of.
it consciously though?
Yeah.
Oh, you were.
I was doing it consciously and unconsciously, because I felt kinder and I wanted to be kind. But then there were moments when obviously I didn't want to be kind. I wanted to be mean.
Yeah.
But then I would consciously go back and drop into that kindness and try to be kind to them and understand that everyone's going through their own trauma.
Yeah.
And everyone's going through their own shit, for instance. Like,
well, exactly.
So it's like, trauma is trauma.
I guess you started to feel the love for yourself.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
through that, you just unconditionally start to feel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, for example, before before ayahuasca, you wanted to just be a mean motherfucker, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I did. That was where my head was at. Like I enjoyed being the guy who was intimidating to people. I enjoyed being a guy who would put down people. But at the same time, I had this weird enjoyment to it, but I hated it.
Really?
I hated every second of it.
What are you enjoying out of it, though? Did it give you some sort of...
I think it was the ego power, man. I think it was an ego thing. It had to do with me feeling like I had some sort of power over somebody else because I was intimidating or this and that. But I honestly think that it was just me guarding myself from the rest of the world. All it was just armor that I was putting on. And my friends would say this all the time when, like, say if you were a friend of my friends and you were about to meet me back in the day, they normally would have gave you some disclaimer about me. That have been like, listen, you're going to meet Jared, and he's kind of an asshole, but get to know him for about 30 minutes to an hour, he's great. So you had to get through this layer.
It's almost like you had to ease into it, right?
Absolutely. Like, I was guarded, but once you got to know me, this is who I've always been. Like, this is the...
I'd never guess, knowing you out here, I'd never guess that you were a Marine. Because you're just so lovely, and, you know, you're always, like, sharing love. And I mean, look, for example, look at this shit. What does that say?
It says, stand your ground, show no weakness. If you have to die, die bloody.
You might have to get that covered up.
No, man, I love the duality of it. I love that the military and contracting and all that was such a huge cornerstone of my life right now. And this is such a beautiful reminder of that. And this also shows people how much one person can change.
Wow.
So it's it's an external message to people when they go, why do you have that?
Go, this is where I was.
Yeah, and this is where I was.
This is a big transformation I've done. I mean, you've done a complete 180. And it's only been like 4 months. Well, it's been a year since you had ayahuasca, but you only came out of Iraq 4 months ago.
4 months ago.
And I mean, I've known you these past 4 months, and mate, every day you're growing and expanding all the time. And it's amazing, you know, and I hope that other people in your situation get inspired by this, you know, other Marines, other whoever's out there.
Well, and I'll be starting a project, if you don't mind me plugging it. I'm going to be starting a project pretty soon that's about getting veterans, combat veterans with PTSD, the availability to come to Nimekaya in the future for free and to document their experience from beginning to a year later, just to see what would happen. Yeah. And so that's my goal for right now, as far as what the next project I'm going to start with, and to do that I'm probably going to do a GoFundMe, and then start all that. So that'll probably be coming up in the next 6 weeks or so.
All right.
Just the starting of that project.
That's amazing, you know what I mean? There's plenty of people out there that need help and they don't know where to turn. Especially with PTSD. I mean, you know, it's I can't imagine how difficult it would be, you know, for these people, these veterans.
I definitely have
And it's for life, really, for a lot of it.
Now, that is a misconception that I want to get out, because that's about your mindset with PTSD. A lot of us believed, and me included, that this was just going to be an everyday thing, and it's just something that you're going to have to get through and learn to deal with every day. But what I realized, it doesn't have to be a life sentence. You don't have to let it be that way, and it does get easier.
So it's a choice.
It's just it's a choice of when you want to let go, and what you're willing to do to let go.
Most people aren't even aware that they can let go, right?
I wasn't aware that I thought it was an everyday thing.
And you just said, we're going to deal with it, and that was it. And that was your life. Do you think a lot of it's got to do as well, like when you come out of, you know, wherever the job is, wherever you're working and on the war zone or whatever, and then you come back to your normal life? Do you think there's a lot of it has to do with the fact that you felt so useful and you felt like you had a purpose while you're out there and you were doing something, you know, you were helping your country and you were doing something so important? That's how you felt, right? And then you come back to normal life, and then what? You got to get yourself some shitty job.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is a lot of us have to face that they don't train warriors to retire.
Right.
So,
I mean, and what are you trained for, really? I mean, in terms of the real world, what are you going to do?
A lot of us get into the defense industry or into do police work or do some. It's funny, we always go back into the service industry. We go serve our environment.
Well,
our
it's
country.
what you know, right?
Yeah.
To some degree.
But a lot of us change our whole. One of the things that I would suggest to any Marine getting out is understand that your Marine Corps life, once that's over, that's it doesn't have to be a hard transition. It can be something that if you want to let go of it, you can. And it's kind of like that high school kid who keeps talking about the football game and he's 30 years old.
Yeah.
And you're like, come on, man, you're 30 now. Like, let it go.
Yeah, right.
So there's a lot of stuff in my life that I'm finding with veterans. We're all learning that we have to let a lot of our past go so we can just become the people we are now.
Right.
You know, there's nothing wrong with cherishing those memories and holding on to them and remembering, because there's a huge part of my life and my friends' lives and whatnot too.
Right, but it doesn't make you who you are now.
It's still my past.
Yeah.
You know, it's not who I am in the moment.
Yeah, right.
As far as being overseas goes and wanting to go back as a contractor and all that stuff, the reason, there was part of that. I felt like that's where I could do the most good for the most money as well. Like, where is my skill set? My skill set is in defense, and I'm training the infantry.
It's just amazing. It's like, that's where I can do the most good, while at the same time you're training people to hurt each other. It's I get where you're coming from, but on a grander scale.
Yeah, it's strange. It's strange.
It trips me
well, they
out.
say the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Of course. We all do our best, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I think there's a lot of ignorance around that also.
Yeah, there is. There's a big ignorant bubble, man. I mean, like, I wouldn't say I was asleep per se. I didn't want to see things for what they were. And I'm not anti-war. I'm not even anti-violence. I just understand that it's a part of the world, and that if I wouldn't have gone, somebody else would have in my place.
Yeah, I understand that.
And I wanted to go because it was an experience that I wanted to experience. And that's all really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the positives coming out of it is like the friendships and the camaraderie and all that sort of stuff that you...
A lot of us don't recognize the humor, the love, the brotherhood.
I can't imagine.
All of that comes out of it. I mean, like, we're a bunch of 18 to 23-year-old guys hanging out.
They're all roughly the same. They're all that young.
So, we're all about 19 to 23. I mean, 23 is pretty old for most of us. I mean, in there.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you're 23 or older, it means that you've stayed in. I got out at 25 because I joined at 19. So it's like, 24, 25.
Do people stay in there for long?
The 4 years is usually the minimum that people stay.
Oh, okay.
And some people, I know plenty of who re-enlisted are still in right now.
Yeah? They just make it their life.
Yeah, we call them lifers. They do 20 years and get their pension and retire and whatnot. It's not a bad way to go.
Do you know any other of your friends that have come out? Like, they're not serving anymore?
Yeah, plenty. I know lots of guys who are out. And they went to college, and some of them are who went into contracting, and some of them went police officers. I mean, they're all over the place.
All right. Well, that's cool. And what's your next move from here?
My next move is Thailand from here.
Yeah, chilling.
Yeah, I mean, like,
you're not going to go back to the...
well, after I go back to the States, I'm thinking about film school.
Yeah. You'll never go back to Iraq or anything like that, right?
I don't want to say never, but I don't feel like right now I need to go back.
It doesn't serve you anymore?
No, it's funny because I don't say never to anything because I don't want to put limitations on what my experience is going to be. I would like to go back back to Iraq in a different capacity. Like, I'd like to go back with a camera this time instead of a gun. But at the same time, if I needed to go back in the defense industry, I obviously made the right choice at the right time for me. So,
well, I guess the question I'm trying to put forward is, will you be able to pick up a gun again?
I still love shooting, but I don't think I'd ever...
Depends what you're shooting at, right?
I don't feel the need to shoot another person anymore.
Yeah. What about even, how do you feel about like animals? And
I don't even see the need in that anymore.
really?
Yeah,
Even
it's
all the way with that.
once again, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it or not doing it. I think that it just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But how I feel about it, like me doing it, I just don't feel like doing it right now. Like,
What do you think's changed within you though?
just understanding that we are more than just ourselves. That I come from the same energy that creates the whole universe, and I'm not separate from that. I am that same energy. So how I see it with animals or insects or people or whatever, it's all the same energy. Mm-hmm. And the separation that we feel from it, is just in our head. Because ultimately it's all the same light, it's all the same vibration, it's all the same carbon matter that was created on this planet. Like, we all came from the same stardust that made this. So ultimately, on a grand scale, me trying to take a life of something or someone else is like wanting to take my own life. And why would I want to take my own life?
It's interesting because it's almost, like you're disrespecting yourself, you're disrespecting life, source.
It feels like that sometimes.
I mean, I guess, like we said before, once you respect yourself and recognize God within you and that you are part of source and it is you, and I mean, how can you really do that? And the thing is, the other people that are on the other side that you're fighting against, they're just human beings too, right?
Absolutely.
They've got families.
Yeah, there's
kids.
You talk to anybody on any side of a war, and they're going to say both sides, the opposite side is a bad guy. There's no bad guys in war. Because, I mean, like, there's people out there who they think that, well, if that's the enemy, that's the bad guy, and then they focus on the demonizing and the hate and everything that all human beings have. Yeah. I mean, like, if you want to look at my country, America, you could point out all the negative things about America easily. When you point out all the negative things about Iraq, you can do that easily.
Right.
I challenge everyone to try to look at the positives, because that's where the real juice of the truth is, because that's where we're all connected.
Yeah.
Because we're all capable of those terrible things, and that's what we're scared of, is because we know what we're capable of. So we demonize it and shun it and put it away and try to pretend it doesn't exist. But if we only were to look at it and embrace it, understand it, and show that side of us love, it might change.
Well, I think it very much may change, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Here's a couple photos of you back in the days, looking real tough with the gun in your hand and your big beard. But Jared, thank you so much. You're so much more of a courageous warrior now that you're able to show your vulnerabilities and share who you truly are with all of us here. Thanks for your time, and this is us, and this is the Being Human experience.